When I discovered the Homeowners Association quietly selling 1,700 acres of my family's generational farmland, I decided to remind them who actually controls the water. What would you do if you found out your neighbors were stealing everything you'd spent your life building? Comment below where you're watching from. The morning was perfect for planting, clear blue skies and just enough breeze to keep you cool. I was on my tractor before sunrise, the same way my grandfather taught me 30 years ago. My phone buzzed for the 5th time, but I ignored it. Nothing was more important than getting these seeds in the ground. My family has owned this 2,000-acre property, Riverside Farm, for 4 generations, and the spring planting waits for no one, not even angry neighbors. When I finally checked my messages at lunch, I almost choked on my sandwich. 10 missed calls from neighbors, 3 voicemails from my cousin, and a formal email with the subject line, "Violation Notice" from the Maple Hollow Homeowners Association. I couldn't believe what I was reading. They claimed my tractor noise violated their tractor noise, violating their peaceful enjoyment, and that my chicken coops emitted offensive odors, harming their property values. The new housing development had been there only 8 months. My farm had been here since 1892. The letter ended with a demand: cease all farming operations within 500 feet of their property line within 48 hours, or face a $200 daily fine. I laughed out loud. They had no authority over my land. I crumpled the paper and tossed it aside. The next morning, I woke to a car door slamming. A woman in a crisp white pantsuit marched across my front yard, clipboard in hand, trailed by 2 men in polo shirts with the Maple Hollow logo. "Mr. Carter," she called as I stepped onto my porch. "I'm Laura Bennett, president of the Maple Hollow HOA. We need to discuss your continued violations." I crossed my arms. "There's nothing to discuss. Your HOA has no jurisdiction over my property." Laura's plastic smile didn't falter. "Actually, according to the county zoning board, your agricultural exemption expired last year. Your property is now subject to our community standards as outlined in Municipal Code Section 42.3. That caught me off guard. My property tax bill certainly hadn't changed. "My family has farmed this land for over 100 years," I said. "No HOA can suddenly claim authority over it." Her smile turned cold. "Times change. We have standards now. Our residents paid premium prices for homes with guaranteed property values." She handed me another notice. "This is an official cease and desist. The board has unanimously voted to enforce these restrictions." After they left, my cousin Ryan, who lives in Maple Hollow and serves on the town council, called. "They've been planning this for months," he warned. "Laura's been meeting privately with developers and even altering meeting minutes after approval." That night, I dug through county records online. My agricultural exemption was still valid for another 5 years. Laura had lied to my face. For the next week, I worked my fields as usual, ignoring the increasingly threatening letters. Then came the daily noise complaints to the sheriff, who apologized but said he had to respond to every report. "Look, Ethan," Sheriff Morales, an old high school friend, said quietly, "I know this is ridiculous, but they're filing complaints every day. They even started a petition calling your farm a public nuisance." How did this escalate so fast? I asked. He lowered his voice. There was a closed-door meeting last week. County commissioners, some city developer, and members of the HOA board. They're pushing hard for a big project. That afternoon, I spotted men in suits walking my eastern fields, taking pictures and measurements. I drove my truck across the roads to confront them. "Can I help you, gentlemen? You're trespassing on private property." A tall man in an expensive suit extended his hand. "Evan Cole, Summit Ridge Development. We're just surveying the land for preliminary planning." "Planning for what, exactly? This is my farm." Evan scrolled his tablet, consulting documents. "According to our paperwork, Summit Ridge purchased 1,700 acres from the Maple Hollow Community Trust 3 weeks ago. Construction begins next month on the new Maple Hollow Commerce and luxury condos." My heart nearly stopped. That was impossible. I never sold my land to anyone. He showed me digital documents, survey maps of my eastern fields bearing official county stamps and signatures. The owner listed was the Maple Hollow Community Trust. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice suddenly hoarse. "No mistake, sir," replied. "Perhaps you should contact the trust. The sale was finalized last month." I raced home, pulled my property deeds from the safe, and compared them to the files on his tablet. Everything looked in order on paper, but something wasn't right.
"I called the county recorder's office. I need to verify the current ownership status of my property," I explained. The clerk took my information. "One moment, sir." The silence stretched too long. "Mr. Carter, there appears to be an ownership division filing from 6 weeks ago. According to our records, the majority of the property, approximately 1,700 acres, was transferred to the Maple Hollow Community Trust. You retain ownership of only the main house and the surrounding 300 acres. My hand started shaking. "That's impossible. I never signed any transfer." "The documents have your signature, sir. Do you want me to email you copies?" When I opened the email, I stared at what appeared to be my own signature on transfer documents I had never seen before. How could this happen? How could the HOA sell land they didn't own? I looked out my window and spotted Laura in her luxury SUV, parked at the edge of my property, talking on her phone while staring directly at my house. When she saw me watching, she smiled and waved. The bulldozers would arrive in 4 weeks. I had less than a month to figure out how the HOA had stolen my family's legacy and to stop them before the first shovel hit the ground. I stood frozen in my muddy boots as the surveyor's words hit me like a thunderbolt. My land sold without my knowledge? Impossible! "There must be a mistake," I said, showing him the property maps I kept in my truck. "This has been Carter family land for over a century." The surveyor scratched his head. "Look, I just go where they tell me, but these coordinates match what Maple Hollow provided." My hands trembled as I drove straight to the county records office. The clerk, Mrs. Rivera, had known my family for decades. "Ethan, I was going to call you," she said, her face worried. "Someone filed new property documents last month. I thought it was strange, but everything looked properly notarized." She pulled up the records on her computer. My stomach dropped as I saw it. Official paperwork showing 1,700 acres of my farmland now belong to the Maple Hollow HOA. Only the 300 acres around my house remained in my name. "This is fraud," I whispered. "These signatures aren't mine." I called an emergency meeting with my lawyer, Sam Grayson. "This is the most brazen land grab I've seen in 30 years of practice," Sam said, examining the documents. "But they covered their tracks well. The paperwork claims your grandfather sold development rights decades ago, and they're just now exercising them." "That's ridiculous. My grandfather would never." "I know," Sam nodded, "but fighting this will take time. They've already sold to developers who probably had no idea the sale was fraudulent." I couldn't wait. The HOA had their monthly meeting that evening, and I was going to crash it. The old community center buzzed with conversation when I walked in. Laura Bennett sat at the center table, her designer outfit and perfect blonde hair making her look like she belonged on a reality TV show, not running a neighborhood association. The room fell silent when people noticed me. "This is a private meeting," Laura said coldly. "Private? Like the private sale of my land?" I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Richard Thompson, the treasurer, adjusted his glasses nervously. "We have no idea what you're talking about." "Really? Then why are there surveyors on my eastern fields today? Why is there paperwork claiming you sold 1,700 acres of my family farm to Summit Ridge developers?" Laura's fake smile didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps you should check your family records more carefully. That land was included in our development zone from the beginning." Richard slid some papers across the table. "It's all perfectly legal. The sale is final." I glanced at the documents, more forgeries showing land boundaries that had never existed. "My family has the original deeds from 1892. These papers are fake, and you know it." "That's a serious accusation," said Janet Miller, who looked genuinely confused. Laura shot Janet a warning look. "The matter is settled. Security, please. Escort Mr. Carter out." A retired police officer who worked part-time security moved toward me. "Sorry, Ethan. Just doing my job." As I was led outside, my neighbor Tom Baker followed me into the parking lot. Tom had moved to Maple Hollow just a year ago, chasing the rural lifestyle that was now being destroyed. "They've been planning this for months," he whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Secret meetings, discussions about expanding the community footprint. Why didn't anyone tell me?" Laura threatened anyone who spoke up. "Jeff Winters questioned the legality last month, and suddenly he had $5,000 in HOA violations. They can fine people into bankruptcy if they want to." I drove home in a daze, my family's legacy crumbling around me. The farm that had fed this county for generations was about to become cookie-cutter houses and strip malls. Unable to sleep, I pulled out my grandfather's old wooden chest, sifting through birth certificates and yellowed photographs. I found it, the original water rights agreement from 1943. The document detailed how my grandfather had allowed the creation of a reservoir on our property, one that now supplied water not just to Riverside Farm, but to the entire surrounding area, including what was now Maple Hollow. I read deeper, my excitement growing. The agreement included specific terms. Agricultural use would always take priority in water allocation decisions, and the rights were tied to the original homestead, the 300 acres I still legally owned. At dawn, I called Sam again. "They might have stolen my land through fake papers," I said, "but they forgot something crucial." "What's that?" Sam asked, yawning. "Who controls their water?" Sam was silent for a moment. "Ethan, be careful. This could get ugly." "They started ugly," I replied. "I'm just finishing it fairly." After hanging up, I noticed a bulldozer cresting the hill on my eastern field. Construction was starting already. Through binoculars, I could see Laura standing with men in suits, pointing excitedly at my best wheat field. I opened my laptop and began researching everything I could about water rights, easements, and local utility regulations. If they thought they could steamroll a simple farmer, they were about to learn how wrong they were. That afternoon, I visited old Mr. Patterson, who had maintained the county's water systems for 40 years before retiring. "Of course I remember that system," he said, spreading out faded blueprints on his kitchen table. "Your granddad was smart. The main control junction is right here, on your remaining property. Always has been." I took photos of the blueprints with my phone. "What are you planning, Ethan?" Mr. Patterson asked, his eyes sharp despite his age. "Just making sure I understand my rights," I replied. That night, as I walked my property line, I watched the lights of Maple Hollow twinkle in the distance. I made my decision. I wouldn't just fight for my land. I would show Laura and her corrupt board exactly who they were messing with. I picked up my phone and made 3 calls. First to Sam, then to the local newspaper, and finally to the state water authority. The game was about to change. What I didn't know was that Laura had just hosted a champagne celebration for select HOA members and developers, promising them that construction would be finished within a year. "Property values will skyrocket," she assured them, "and Riverside Farm will finally be gone." Little did they know what would happen when they turned on their taps. The sound of bulldozers ripping into my family's farmland woke me at dawn. I rushed outside in my pajamas to find massive yellow machines tearing up the rich soil that had fed our community for generations. My stomach dropped as I watched crops being destroyed right before my eyes. "Stop! You can't do this!" I shouted, waving my arms frantically. The workers ignored me, continuing their destruction as if I wasn't even there. Laura Bennett drove up in her shiny black SUV, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes. She stepped out, high heels sinking into the soft earth. "Progress waits for no one," she said with a smirk, snapping photos with her phone. "Maple Hollow Villas will be the most exclusive address in the county. 30 homes, starting at just 7 figures each." I felt sick. This land grows food for thousands of people. You can't just turn it into luxury homes. "We already did," Laura laughed, showing me her phone screen with a digital rendering of massive houses where my cornfields once stood. "The papers are signed. The county approved the zoning change last week." As she drove away, she deliberately splashed mud onto my boots. I stood there, hands shaking with anger, watching years of hard work disappear under the bulldozer tracks. That evening, my neighbor Emma called. "Have you seen what they're posting online? The HOA is bragging about their acquisition all over social media." I checked their page and found Laura posing with Richard Thompson and the developers, champagne glasses raised high. The caption read, "Expanding Maple Hollow. Goodbye, outdated farming. Hello, luxury living." The comment section was filled with angry responses from locals who relied on my farm for fresh produce. At least the community was on my side. But that wouldn't save my land. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my kitchen until 3 a.m., reviewing every document my family had ever kept. Birth certificates, death records, tax forms, and property maps covered my table. Then I found it. My great-grandfather's original water rights agreement from 1922. I read it carefully, then read it again. A slow smile spread across my face. At sunrise, I called my old college friend Sarah, now a water rights attorney. "They didn't do their homework," she confirmed after reviewing my documents. "Your family owns the water rights to the entire valley. The easement only grants usage to others as long as it doesn't interfere with agricultural needs." I knew exactly what to do. By noon, I was at the County Water Authority office filing paperwork. The clerk's eyes widened as she processed my request. "Are you sure about this?" she asked.
This will affect hundreds of homes. I'm very sure, I replied calmly. I'm redirecting the water allocation, as is my legal right. 2 days later, I was eating breakfast when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Facebook messages, texts, and voicemails poured in from Maple Hollow residents. Their water had slowed to a trickle, then stopped completely. Laura called 17 times before I finally answered. "What did you do?" she screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Nothing illegal," I replied, buttering my toast. "I simply exercised my water rights as specified in the original easement agreement. The document states I can prioritize agricultural usage." "People need water to live," Richard shouted in the background. "People need food too," I countered. "I'm redirecting all water to my remaining 300 acres. I'm intensifying production there, since you stole the rest of my farmland." Laura's voice turned sickeningly sweet. "Listen, maybe we moved too quickly. We can discuss some compensation." "The time for talking was before you falsified documents and stole my property," I interrupted. "Now I'm just protecting what's left." I hung up and walked outside. The sun felt good on my face as I inspected the irrigation system I had modified. Water that once supplied the entire valley now flowed only to my remaining fields. An hour later, 3 police cars pulled into my driveway. Sheriff Morales stepped out first. I'd known him since high school. "Got complaints about water tampering," he said, looking uncomfortable. I handed him my documentation. "Everything I've done is legal. My family has owned these water rights for over a century." While he reviewed the papers, a news van arrived. Laura must have called them, thinking they'd take her side. The reporter, Julie Ramirez from Channel 5, approached me with a microphone. "Can you explain what's happening with the water supply?" she asked. I smiled. "I'd be happy to," I said, pulling out maps showing the original property lines and water rights documents. "And I'd also like to discuss how the Maple Hollow HOA falsified records to steal 1,700 acres of farmland that's been in my family for generations." Julie's eyes lit up. She clearly recognized a bigger story than just a water dispute.
By evening, the HOA called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but my neighbor Tom texted me updates throughout. "They're freaking out," he wrote. "Developers halted construction. They're threatening to sue the HOA for misrepresentation. Property values are already dropping." At 11:42 p.m., my doorbell rang. Laura stood there, her perfect makeup smudged, her confident posture gone. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking, "turn the water back on. People have children, elderly parents. They can't stay in homes without water." "We can talk about compensation," she offered desperately. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Compensation isn't enough. I want my land back." Laura's face hardened. "That's impossible. The contracts are signed." "Then I guess we have nothing more to discuss," I replied, starting to close the door. "Wait!" she cried out. "The developers, they might be willing to reconsider if there's a water issue. I can set up a meeting." I paused, considering her offer. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my kitchen table. Bring the developers, your lawyer, and all those fake documents you stole my land." As Laura hurried back to her car, I noticed lights on in every house in Maple Hollow. Nobody was sleeping tonight. They were all wondering the same thing. How had they never questioned where their water came from? My hands shook as I entered the courthouse. Cameras flashed in my face. Someone had tipped off the local news about our battle. The judge had rushed our hearing after 3 days without water had left Maple Hollow in chaos. Some families had even checked into hotels just to take showers. The courtroom was split down the middle. On one side sat Laura and the HOA board members in their designer clothes, looking confident. On the other side were my supporters, farmers in work boots and practical clothes who relied on Riverside Farm for their livelihood. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Martinez entered. Laura smirked at me from across the aisle. She thought she had this in the bag. Little did she know what was coming. My lawyer, M. Rodriguez, started by showing aerial photos of my family's farm dating back to the 1950s. "Your Honor, this land has been continuously farmed by the same family for over 130 years, she explained. "I'd like to enter into evidence the original land grant from 1892. Laura's lawyer jumped up. "Objection! Old documents are irrelevant. We have a modern legal sale agreement signed just last month." Judge Martinez frowned. "I'll determine what's relevant. Continue, Miss Rodriguez." My heart pounded as Rodriguez unveiled our secret weapon, a large map showing all the water lines in the county. "This property controls the water access for the entire region. The easement agreement specifically states that agricultural use takes priority in any water allocation decisions." Murmurs spread throughout the courtroom. I watched Laura's face closely, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of worry in her eyes. Her lawyer presented their sale documents, which looked impressive and official, but Miss Rodriguez was ready. "Your Honor, we've had these documents examined by 3 separate experts," she said, handing a thick folder to the judge. "They've identified at least 7 signs of document tampering, including digital manipulation of the property boundaries." The judge frowned as he flipped through the pages. "These are serious allegations." "There's more," Miss Rodriguez continued. She nodded to her assistant, who wheeled in a cart with 5 boxes of documents. "We've subpoenaed the bank records of the Maple Hollow HOA board members." Laura's face went completely white. Richard, the treasurer, started sweating visibly. "These records show unusual deposits to the personal accounts of 5 board members within 48 hours of the land sale," Miss Rodriguez said firmly. "Deposits that match exactly 2% of the sale price, divided evenly among them." The courtroom erupted. Judge Martinez banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order! I will have order!" During the chaos, I watched Laura turn to Richard, her face twisted with rage. She was already looking for someone to blame. "We need a recess," her lawyer demanded. "These allegations are completely unfounded, and we need time to prepare a response." The judge agreed to a 30-minute break. As people filed out, I stayed seated, trying to calm my racing heart. Ryan slid into the seat next to me. "You're winning," he whispered. "Half the HOA members look ready to throw Laura under the bus." In the hallway, I couldn't help but overhear Laura and Richard arguing in a corner. "You said this was foolproof," Richard hissed. "Now we're facing criminal charges." Laura's perfect mask finally cracked. How was I supposed to know his family had some ancient water rights document? Nobody reads that fine print. "Well, somebody should have," Richard snapped. "The developers are already talking about suing us for misrepresentation." I pretended to check my phone while listening. This was better than I'd hoped. They were turning on each other. When court resumed, the mood had shifted dramatically. Laura's lawyer requested a brief consultation with the judge and my attorney. They spoke in hushed tones at the bench for several minutes. Finally, Judge Martinez addressed the court. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm issuing an immediate injunction halting all development on the disputed 1,700 acres." I let out the breath I'd been holding. It wasn't over, but it was a start. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I'm ordering a full investigation into the documentation provided by the Maple Hollow HOA. If evidence of fraud is confirmed, this matter will be referred to the district attorney's office." Laura's perfect posture collapsed. She looked like she might faint. As people began filing out, Mrs. Jensen, an elderly HOA resident, approached me. "I had no idea they were doing this," she said quietly. "Many of us didn't know. We just wanted nice homes." "I understand," I told her. "This isn't about punishing residents. It's about stopping corrupt leadership." Outside, the developer representative was waiting, looking nervous as he pulled at his tie. "Mr. Carter," he said, extending his hand, "I want to make something very clear. We were misled by the HOA. Our company purchased that land in good faith. We had no idea it wasn't theirs to sell." I studied his face, trying to decide if he was telling the truth. "Your bulldozers destroyed crops that would have fed hundreds of families," I said. He winced. "We want to make this right. We're planning to sue the HOA, but we'd rather work directly with you on a solution." I thought about all the people who depended on Riverside Farm, workers, local restaurants, families. Fighting would take years. Maybe there was another way. "Come out to the farm tomorrow," I suggested. "I have some ideas that might work for both of us." As I walked to my truck, Laura stormed past, flanked by her lawyer. She stopped when she saw me, her eyes filled with hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You think you've won, but my husband plays golf with the mayor. We have connections you can't imagine." I smiled calmly. "You might want to save your energy for your legal defense, Laura. I hear fraud charges can be pretty stressful." Her face turned an alarming shade of red. For a moment, I thought she might actually throw a punch right there on the courthouse steps. Instead, she jabbed a finger toward me. "You'll regret this. Nobody makes a fool of me." As she stalked away, Richard hung back with a panicked expression. I noticed the news cameras capturing everything. Laura's threat had just been broadcast to the entire county. Ryan appeared at my side. "The other board members are already talking about holding emergency elections," he whispered. "Nobody wants to go down with Laura's ship." I nodded, watching her retreating figure. I'd won the first battle, but the war wasn't over. I still needed to get my land back, and Laura wasn't going to surrender easily. But for the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Sometimes justice really does prevail, especially when you refuse to give up.
When you control the water supply, you won't believe what happened next. 6 months later, I stood in my eastern fields as the morning sun sparkled across the dew-covered crops. The bulldozers that once tore into my family's legacy were gone. In their place, farmers worked the land that had been returned to me, all 1,700 acres of it. The judge had thrown out the fake sale papers and ordered everything back to Riverside Farm. "I still can't believe we won," my wife said, squeezing my hand as we overlooked our restored farmland. "We didn't just win," I said. "We changed everything." The morning after our court victory, my phone exploded with calls from reporters. The story of an HOA trying to steal a family farm had hit a nerve. People from across the country sent messages of support. Some even mailed boxes of homegrown vegetables as a show of farmer solidarity. Laura and her HOA buddies couldn't hide from the spotlight. Camera crews camped outside their fancy houses, asking about the kickback money they'd taken. Richard broke down on live TV, admitting they'd planned the whole thing over secret meetings and champagne. "We just thought no one would care about some old farm," he sobbed into the microphone. But people did care, a lot. 3 weeks after the court decision, I got a surprise visit from the developer's new CEO. Their old boss had been fired over the scandal. "We made a terrible mistake," she said, sitting at my kitchen table. "Our company never would have moved forward if we'd known the truth." I pushed a plate of my wife's fresh-baked cookies toward her. "What happens now with your company?" I asked. She smiled. "That's why I'm here. We have a different idea. Would you consider selling just 50 acres, legally this time, for something that could help everyone?" Instead of luxury houses, they proposed building a modern farming facility on a small corner of my property. It would create jobs and process crops from farms all over the county, including mine. Plus, they'd fund a farming education center where city kids could learn where their food comes from. "And the Maple Hollow HOA?" I asked cautiously. "They'll have no control over any of this," she promised. In fact, the next HOA meeting looked nothing like the old ones. Ryan, my neighbor who had secretly tried to warn me, had been elected the new president after Laura and half the board resigned in disgrace.
The remaining members voted unanimously to approve my new farming operation and create a buffer zone between our properties. Most of us moved here because we loved the country feel, Ryan explained as we walked the property line together. We never wanted to destroy what makes this place special. The criminal charges against Laura and Richard moved forward. The district attorney had found bank transfers showing exactly how much money had lined their pockets from the fake land deal. Laura had to sell her big house after her husband divorced her over the scandal. I sometimes saw her driving past my fields, her face pinched with anger. As summer turned to fall, we broke ground on the new processing center. Local farmers came to celebrate, bringing pies and side dishes made from their own harvests. Even residents from Maple Hollow joined in, including many who admitted they'd been bullied into silence by Laura's threats of massive fines. My grandfather was a farmer, one older gentleman from the development told me. I hated what they were trying to do to you. By winter, something remarkable had happened. The division between the farming community and Maple Hollow began to heal. We created a weekly farmers market in the space between our properties. Families from the development signed up for crop shares, paying up front for boxes of fresh produce throughout the growing season. The water rights issue was solved too. We drafted a fair agreement guaranteeing enough water for both my agricultural needs and their households. In return, the HOA bylaws were permanently changed to protect farming activities from complaints. 1 year after our court victory, we hosted a community harvest festival on the very fields that had almost been stolen. Children from both the development and farming families ran through a corn maze together while their parents chatted over apple cider as sunset painted the sky orange. I found myself standing next to Ryan. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if they'd gotten away with it? I looked across the crowd of people enjoying food grown from this very soil. I think about it every day, I said. What's that? He asked. People forget that fancy houses and perfect lawns don't feed anyone. This land doesn't just crops, it grows community. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. Laura never understood that. She just saw dollar signs. I spotted my oldest son teaching a Maple Hollow teenager how to drive our smallest tractor, both of them laughing. You know what the best revenge is? I said, smiling at the sight. It's watching her drive past every single day, seeing what she almost destroyed not only survive, but thrive. And knowing that while she lost everything, we rebuilt something far greater.
We all gained something better that night. As my family gathered around our table, filled with food we'd grown ourselves, I realized the HOA had accidentally given me something precious. They had tried to take my land, but instead they'd helped me show an entire community why Riverside Farm matters, and that lesson would feed people's hearts long after their fancy development had faded.